I've thought about how to answer this question a lot. Those three things have saved us. Do you have any embryos left? How we got our baby to sleep in her bassinet, worth every single penny. It just was leaking everywhere. Everything was leaking. Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. I hope y'all are doing super duper well. I should get a microphone or something for the camera now because I feel like my voice is always a little less boomy than it used to be. Because baby girl is napping in the next room. She could wake up at any point, so if the camera angle or the location changes, that's when you'll know why. But if this is the first time you are stumbling across my channel, hello, my name is Mac. My husband's name is Jack. Yes, Mac and Jack, and we went on a 3 to 4 year infertility journey to get to this point. That whole playlist will be linked down below, as well as my birth vlog, my birth story if you're interested. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button before you leave, and without further ado, let's get into this postpartum newborn Q&A. I put a question box up on my Instagram, so if you want to be part of these videos in the future, my Instagram is linked down below. But let's dive in and see how many questions we can get to. A lot of questions just asking how I'm doing a mental health check-in, and that is just the sweetest thing. If you haven't watched some of my previous videos, I opened up a lot about my baby blues. I think that is a term that we should just throw away. It sounds a little more cutesy than it actually felt. But I mentioned in one of those videos that I felt like every single week the fog of postpartum and those baby blues was lifting just a little bit. And at this point, my baby is officially 3 months old, and I would say I have turned a corner at some point. I don't know when exactly that point was, and I'm sure that the fog will continue to lift, but it's one of those things that I don't realize that the fog is still around until the next week when it lifts a little bit more and it lifts a little bit more. And as more things are clicking as new parents, as we're learning more things, as things are just falling into place, it's just the best. It really is. If you guys are in the depths of it, I hope that I can just be an example of it will get better and it can get better. But yeah, thank you for checking in. I really appreciate it. Okay, I got asked how we got our baby to sleep in her bassinet a few times during this Q&A, and I don't blame you because it was probably the biggest celebration that we had so far. If you guys have a Velcro baby, you can understand that it's bittersweet. You love that you can be a comforting place for your baby, and during that fresh newborn postpartum stage, the baby snuggles are just amazing. But reality starts to set in where work becomes a thing, going back to work becomes a thing, and all of a sudden you're stressing about where you can put your baby to nap that's not on you, because that's just life, unfortunately. So when people ask me about the bassinet, there are two things that I remember in the crazy, very fresh newborn stage fog that we did that got her to sleep in her bassinet more than 20 minutes at a time. And I think that led into us being able to do bassinet naps during the day as well, because we tried these two things, and then from those she just got more comfortable with the bassinet as time went on. Number one, we realized that our bassinet mattress or sheet was just not taking in some of the room warmth, if that makes sense. Like the bassinet itself felt cold, which makes sense. Our beds feel cold when we first get into them, but as a newborn who doesn't know temperature in the womb, doesn't know cold versus warm versus our body heat versus not our body heat, we would realize that we would rock her to sleep, and then when we would place her in the bassinet, it would of course jostle her or wake her up because she went from our warm body to a cold bassinet. So what we tried was putting a heating pad on the bassinet mattress just for a little bit while we were rocking her, and when we were ready to put her down, we would remove the heating pad, and then the mattress was just nice and nummy warm. So that is something that I think worked, because it was kind of night and day when we tried that. At least she wouldn't wake up like right away when we would place her down, so that was a really great accomplishment. And then the other thing was this Instagram video that Jack sent me. I will scroll back up to our DMs and share it with you guys. It was a very specific step-by-step process of how this woman was laying down her newborn into her bassinet. And when I tell you that when we tried this and it worked, oh my gosh, it's literally a 6-step process as far as like laying her down on her side first, feet to shoulder and then slowly rolling her to her back, keeping your hand on her chest. Like, it sounds so ridiculous, but between the heating pad and then the way we were laying her down in her bassinet, those two I remember shifted the game for us for at least the nighttime bassinet needs. And then because she got used to being in her bassinet for longer periods during the night, I truly believe that that bled into us being able to do bassinet naps during the day. I hope that helps somebody out there. Have you adjusted regarding sleep? I think I have, honestly. Something that I did want to mention at the beginning of this video though, just real quick, that applies to literally every question that I'm going to answer here, is that these answers are simply from my experience, and that does not mean that it's going to be your experience if you're currently pregnant and expecting a newborn. And it also doesn't mean that this is every new mom's experience that ever went through new motherhood, if that makes sense. So if I'm saying something, please don't take it as fact that it happens for all moms or that it's going to happen for you. This is just my experience. I really just wanted to put that out there before diving further into these questions. So regarding sleep, I still think I'm semi-traumatized from the first couple of weeks of sleep deprivation. There is a reason why sleep deprivation is a literal form of torture when it comes to like war times. I'm so much better, obviously, than I was in those first couple of really fresh weeks. But the idea of her not going down, or the idea of her sleep being interrupted, or something that I could do to like affect her nighttime sleep just so I can get the sleep that I need from a bare minimum, is still really stressful for me. But I will say I have totally gotten used to and just settled into the fact that babies are gonna baby, and getting up in the middle of the night just once or twice to make sure that she's fed, or if she starts fussing because she's hungry, is just such a normal thing. I think we put a lot of pressure on newborns and ourselves and our family dynamics to get our baby to just sleep fully through the night, and that can create, like I said, a lot of pressure and stress. But when I started letting go of that expectation and started just being thankful that my baby gives us pretty long stretches at night right now, and I just have to get up once in the wee hours to feed her, like, that's really great, and I feel really grateful for that. Any amount of stretch of sleep that I get, I'm really happy about. So I would say that I have settled into that, just being able to let that expectation go, because babies are gonna baby. That's what my friend Abby said. Babies are gonna baby, and I keep that at the top of my mind. A lot of questions about my breastfeeding journey, and that is something I realized that I just never touched on. And I think the reason is twofold. I know that breastfeeding can be very difficult for people, and I know that it's a sensitive topic, and so I just don't want to add to anybody's stress about it just from my experience. But then also, it is something that did come relatively easy for me, and I'm incredibly grateful for that. But it was a lot more difficult in the beginning than it is now. I think anything new is that way in motherhood, if that makes sense. Like, I have never breastfed anything in my entire life. Obviously, I have never sustained a human being with my body besides pregnancy, but you know, like actually physically feeding them in my entire life. So the learning curve of it was definitely there. There were definitely those toe curling latches at the beginning as my body is just getting used to and just kind of getting settled into breastfeeding. But I will say those silverettes that everyone talks about, worth every single penny. I never got any cracks. I never got any chapped nipples or anything like that. It was just my body getting used to latching and all of that, and now it's literally not even a thing. I don't feel any pain whatsoever. But the silverettes, oh my gosh, so good. I don't even think I really dipped into any nipple butter or anything like that because the silverettes were literally so good. I think I wore them for about the first week, and then I realized I didn't need them anymore, but they were magic. But mamas, I am in the camp that fed is best. You cannot pull me from that camp. If your baby is being fed and loved and cared for in your house, that is all that is important. Honestly, that is seriously the most important thing. And I will say, if breastfeeding was incredibly difficult for me, whether it was latching or my supply or anything like that, I know myself and I fully prepared myself mentally for those things. If that was the case for me, I would not be breastfeeding right now. It just wouldn't be worth it as far as my stress, mental health, which then feeds into, no pun intended, how I'm able to care for my baby and show up for her. And that's the most important thing. So I was fully prepared to not breastfeed at all, and that is something I didn't expect to just go so smoothly for us, and I'm really, really grateful for it. I did have a question for any breastfeeding mamas out there. I'm currently still wearing like the Breastfeeding Pads by Leno, like that brand, you know? Is that just part of breastfeeding, or is there a point where in breastfeeding you can stop wearing the pads? Because they're not the most discreet things, if I'm being honest, and I don't love them, but I also don't love the idea of leaking everywhere. So do I stop wearing them when we're just done breastfeeding? Or is there a point where you just stopped wearing them? Or is there just like a different solution? Let a girl know. Similar to that note, people were asking about pumping. I personally have only like 3 bags stored in the freezer, and it is something that I was putting a little bit of mental pressure on myself for. Like every day I would see my pump just out and about being like, oh, I really should pump to like build a supply and all of that stuff. But I didn't know like when to pump if I'm exclusively breastfeeding. Like when do I pump to increase supply? When do I introduce bottles, etc.? And it is something that I'm definitely, I would say, interested in. I would love for her to take a bottle. I would love for Jack to feed her as well. So it's something I asked her pediatrician about recently at one of her appointments, and she just made me feel so much less pressured about it. She was like, hey, if it's not something that is a need right now and you don't feel this like overwhelming urge to build a supply, or you don't need somebody else to care for your baby, it just might not be a necessity for you right now, and that's totally fine. And I was like, you know what? That is totally fine. Right now, I'm super happy just exclusively breastfeeding her. There's just not a need right now for me to pump. But a couple tips she did say if I'm interested in building a supply for any reason is to pump right after she's done feeding, just to get whatever she didn't get out. That's a way that we can build a mini supply. If we're interested in just introducing some bottles, I can pump when it's time to feed and immediately give her that bottle, or Jack can immediately give her that bottle. That's also a good way. Because the timing of like when to pump if I am exclusively breastfeeding was just confusing to me. So those are just a couple good tips that she gave. But right now we're just happy rocking and rolling with what we're doing. And it definitely lifted a little bit of pressure I was having on myself whenever I would like see my pump out and about, you know? What was one thing you wish you knew going into the first 2 weeks? Oh my gosh. So many things. I think there were so many things heading into those first 2 weeks that I just couldn't have prepared myself for. There's nothing I could have read. There's nothing I could have taken a class on. There's nothing anyone could have told me. And I think that is what is comforting in a way, because there's so much that you are just going to figure out, and just give yourself the grace knowing that that's going to be the case. You are going to figure out so many different things, even if in the moment it feels like you have no idea what you're doing. I get it, but things are just gonna click literally either every single hour or every single day or every single week. There are new things that are going to click with you and your baby, and just to allow that to happen, don't put any pressure on yourself for a timeline for things to click. Just take this time that is the newborn stage for those moments and for you to just fully melt into motherhood, because there's nothing that you should be studying right now or preparing yourself for. You're going to be great. Even in the moments where you feel like you are drowning, give yourself so much grace and just know you are absolutely not alone in that, and just let yourself melt into it. It is hard, but it is beautiful at the same time, and there's nothing that you should be doing different than you are doing right now. That's what I wish I knew. Favorite diapers and any thoughts on sustainable options? My thoughts on sustainable options is you do you, boo. Literally everyone's diapering is totally their preference. But for us, Huggies are so good. I would say Huggies, but then we've also tried the Kirkland brand. We got a Costco recently for the first time ever in the state of Maine. And of course I ran to get that membership because specifically I heard great things about the Kirkland brand diapers. The price is amazing, and honestly, we were using Pampers for a little bit there and they just leaked so much. She did not fit in the newborn size for sure. And then we went up to size 1 and she just was leaking everywhere. Everything was leaking. So we went went out, we got some Kirkland diapers, and the blowouts are very minimal. The leaks are very minimal, so we love those. And I heard that those are literally Huggies but rebranded. I don't know how true that is, but we loved Huggies and we love Kirkland, and they're very similar. So those are our favorites. A lot of questions about routine, whether it's sleep routine, feeding routine, etc. And I cannot recommend the Taking Care of Babies sleep course enough. I think a lot of people hear Taking Care of Babies and they immediately associate it with sleep training, and a lot of people have a lot of different feelings about sleep training. For me personally, it's your baby, it's your family. We're all gonna do what's best for our baby and our family. But the pieces of gold, the nuggets of gold that we have gotten from that course have absolutely nothing to do with sleep training. I don't even think she touches on sleep training until like month 4 or something. I don't know, because we haven't even gotten there. The information that she provides for those either first 4 weeks or for the first 3 months are just seriously invaluable, and it has given us the structure that I craved so deeply after that first month. So I highly recommend, highly recommend. But a couple things that absolutely saved us: look up wake windows. I didn't even know what a wake window was until I had a baby and until this course. I would say that saved us, because we were just always so lost in why she was crying or what the next step was. Like, what's the next move that we're making in our day? But knowing how long an average baby is awake for, depending on how old they are, was just so telling. Because especially in those early weeks, I felt like if she was awake, she was crying because she was hungry, and then after I was feeding her, after the feed and the diaper and all that stuff, she was crying and I wasn't sure why, but it's because she was ready to go back down to sleep. And just knowing that information was just so key, and it allowed us to have some sort of routine. We knew that when she woke up, it was time to change her diaper, and then it was time to feed her, and then by the time she was done feeding, it was probably time to get her to go back down to sleep. And then paying attention to how those wake windows shifted, or just how they lengthened as she got a little bit older, just helped us with that routine. For example, right now at 3 months, when she wakes from her nap, I know that from the time she wakes up, it's probably about an hour and 15 that she'll be tired again. So in that, we change her diaper, we feed her, and then we have some play mat time, and we just pay attention to that wake window and also some cues that she gives us that she's sleepy again, and then we put her back down. And we also couple that with making sure that we're feeding her at least every 3 hours. That's kind of the sweet spot that we found for us. And also not letting her sleep more than 2 hours at a time. Those are huge. Wake windows, not letting her sleep during the day more than 2 hours at a time, and making sure she feeds around every 3 hours. I know it sounds complicated, but ironically, all of those things flow very smoothly together. For example, if I look at my app, I love the Huckleberry app. Big proponent for the Huckleberry app. She fed 3 hours ago, so it's time to actually go get her, and she's been asleep for about 2 hours, so it's perfect. It just kind of flows together. I don't know how it works out, but it just does. And those things are what have helped us get longer stretches at night. Making sure that she's getting enough sleep during the day makes us get longer stretches at night. Ironically, you wouldn't think that. And also making sure that she's eating enough in a day, like not going longer than about the 3 hour mark for us, builds her calories during the day so that she just doesn't need as much at night. Huge. Like, all of these things, those 3 things, if I could literally tell anybody, those 3 things have saved us as far as routine, night sleep, and an overall just happier flowing day for our family. How often do you guys change diapers in the first month versus now? So unless there was like an obvious, okay, she just pooped, we're gonna change that right away, we typically change diapers whenever she would wake up. It just became part of the routine, like I was outlining before. Jack's home, by the way. He's making bread in the other room, so if you hear that, that's what that is. But we more so made diapers as part of the wake, diaper, feed, put back to sleep type of routine. So it didn't become kind of an extra thing to think about. It was just part of that cycle. But because she was feeding more often in the first 4 weeks, the diapers became more often. So I think because it went along with that, we're probably changing them a little bit less now, and she's doing great. Honestly, ironically, less diaper rash than she had in the beginning too. I also really liked this question. Did you see a lactation consultant? How did those first weeks of breastfeeding go for you? I already touched on breastfeeding, but the lactation consultant thing. My cousin gave me this piece of advice and I thought it was super, super good. She said before you even leave the hospital or even before you give birth to your baby, set up a lactation consultant appointment and you can always cancel it if you don't need it. It's one of those things that you will want on the books already versus something that you have to make when you're already struggling. It can already be on the books, and if you want to cancel it, you can. But if you have any questions or you're struggling a bit, you can always have that ready to go for you. Do you have any embryos left? And if not, would you do IVF from the start again for a sibling for her? We do. We have 4 embryos on ice waiting for us whenever we're ready for them, which is so crazy. Like, IVF takes a lot from you in a way, and it's such an intense process, but to know that we have 4 embryos ready to go is also kind of really cool. Like, her siblings are just like chilling, literally chilling in the freezer right now. Wild. But if we didn't have any in the freezer and we ended up needing more fertility treatments to have another baby, I would absolutely go through IVF again. Again, it's a really intense process, but one that I have under my belt now, and it's also has its own magical moments to it too. And I don't know, I just have a really special place in my heart for IVF now that we have our baby. Any advice for staying hopeful after a failed embryo transfer? Oh my gosh, I don't think there is anything that anybody could have said when we had our first embryo transfer fail to make me feel better. It is this insane feeling of loss that I did not expect to feel. I was devastated. I felt this sense of grief, like a loved one had just passed, and I had to also simultaneously think of next steps and leave it behind, but also carry it with me. It was so hard. So if you are going through any failed transfers, I am so sorry. I know how it feels and I don't wish that upon anybody. But I think I would say if you're ready to bring hope back into your heart and look forward to next steps, or at least just look at next steps, start looking for people whose transfers failed that have their miracle baby. Because I had zero, like literally 0 to negative hope when our transfer failed, when that first transfer failed. And to know that second transfers or even third transfers happen for people all the time really helped me. Like, if it can happen for them and their IUIs failed and their transfer failed and they had all these tests done that I had done and now they have their baby, it made it feel like it was possible. Even if everything seemed to have failed up to that point, it made it feel like I could be in their shoes one day too. I also had a couple questions on body image, and I'm so glad because I would have forgotten to touch on this. I touched on body image as it relates to pregnancy during one of my pregnancy Q&As, and I remember expressing that I hope I can take that view of my body into postpartum, and I'm really happy to say that I've been able to. It sucks to say this, but I never really had a great relationship with my body, no matter what stage it was in. I was always so critical of it. I never liked it. I never felt connected to it, and especially going through infertility, I felt even a more disconnect with my body, because if it doesn't look how I wanted it to, like, why can't it at least function how I think it's supposed to function, right? Like, why can't it conceive a baby and carry a baby? That was incredibly heartbreaking as well. So I just found myself sick of my body in more ways than one. And so when I got pregnant, it was just this insane amount of pride. I was so proud of like what my body could do for me versus how it looked. So it took pregnancy to cure my body image issues, really. But now heading into postpartum, the difference between pregnancy and now is that I had birth in between there, and that gave me such a newfound respect for what my body can do. Not only can it grow a baby, but I can go through the most grueling process of birth and birth out my own baby also. Like, that was just crazy. And then seeing how my body shifted shifted and changed during postpartum was the most crazy experience too. I just can't believe women's bodies can do what they can do, and I am so lucky. I feel so grateful to have been able to see that firsthand through pregnancy, birth, and now postpartum. So I have that respect for it now. I can't say I've been so caught up on how it looks, if I'm being honest. There will definitely be like glimpses here and there, or I'll catch me looking at my stretch marks, but it won't come with a ton of negativity. And honestly, the mental state that I'm in now is that that's just not the phase of life that I'm in. I'm not in the phase of life of wanting to bounce back. I honestly couldn't give a flying F if I bounce back or not. And I'm not in the phase of life where I'm like, I want to get on this gym routine and I want to go to the gym and hit this many reps and this weight on the squats. Like, it's just not where I'm at right now, and that is totally okay. And it's definitely been a new experience, just not worrying about what I look like, because there's just so many more important things that your body can do for you versus how it looks. Let's do one more lighter question and then one deeper question to end off. Somebody asked, do we have a changing table and is it worth it, or just changing her wherever we are right now? So if you haven't seen my newborn must-haves video that I have up, I'll leave it linked down below, because that goes into the specific products that we have. But we have a diaper caddy that we just kind of take around the house. That was more so used in the very early weeks. I would change her on the couch, I would change her on the table, I would change her anywhere. But we also have a more permanent changing pad on top of the dresser in her nursery. And as she got a little bit older, we just tend to go there for diaper changes. It's right down the hall. It's not that big of a deal. And she really likes it. So I think that's why we've been spending more time changing diapers on it. Whenever we put her on it and we're changing her diaper, she just like loves chatting with us. We also know that she likes being high up, whether it's on us or on the diaper changing station. So that's probably why too. But yeah, I would highly recommend just a caddy for those like early weeks to just take around with you, because it is really convenient. But we also use our like more formal diaper changing station too. What was your expectation versus reality of postpartum, and what was just unexpected overall? And I've thought about how to answer this question a lot, and I think just everything, if I'm being honest. Like I touched on in the beginning, there is literally nothing that I could have read, heard, been taught in like a newborn care class that could have prepared me for what the early weeks would actually be like. And specifically relating to baby blues and the hormone drop and those emotions, I, for some reason, thought that just because this baby was so wanted and so fought for, that I would be able to bypass those feelings. And it turns out the baby blues are just way more than your feelings about new parenthood. You are going through the most significant hormone drop that a human being will ever experience. And just because the baby is so wanted and so loved does not negate that physical shift within your body and what comes out of that physical shift of hormones in your body. So I would say overall, my mental health in postpartum was very unexpected. But again, if you're in it, if you're in the trenches, just look at me as an example. You really can turn a corner, I promise. But it's something that I definitely kept an eye on as the weeks went on, and I'm still keeping an eye out on it. There are still really hard moments and really hard days, but at this point I think that's just motherhood, or I think that's just parenthood. You're always wanting the best for your baby, and that comes with a lot of pressure and stress at times. And there are days where your baby can just be putting you through the ringer. There's more blowouts than usual, she's more fussy than usual, she won't go down for her nap, and it just all seems to stack on top of each other, and that just makes for a harder day. But the postpartum shift of things was just very unexpected for me personally. A couple little things. I expected to want to dress her up in more things than I actually did. If you guys saw my pregnancy vlogs, you know I got just a select few like newborn size outfits, because she definitely was in the newborn clothes for about a solid month. So I'm glad I had newborn sleepers and newborn outfits, but I don't think I touched a single newborn outfit. I think I put her in some pants at one point and an oversized sweatshirt that is actually a 6-month sweatshirt, but I did not have the desire personally to dress her up in anything but her sleepers. But I have friends that get so much joy out of dressing up their newborn in actual outfits, so it's totally a personal preference at that point. Also, as a new mom, I kind of just expected her to like baby products that are made for babies, if that makes sense. Like, in my mind, why wouldn't she like to be in her stroller, or like why wouldn't she like to be put in the baby bouncer, or why wouldn't she like the Snuggle Me organic? You know, like, these things are made for babies. Why wouldn't she want to be put in them? It's because she's her own individual human. She's also a baby that just came out of a womb where there was no hot or cold. Like I was saying, she never knew hunger. She never knew anything besides being in there. So to be placed in something with straps, or to be placed in something that moves like this versus moves like the womb moved, I just thought, yeah, we'll get this thing so that we can put her down, so that we can shower, we can put her down to do this, and it just wasn't the case. I lied. Let's end with this one. I love this one. On your hard days, what do you need to hear? Oh my gosh. I think the number one thing that helped me during the really tough days, and still some things that I remind myself to this day when I just have some normal hard days, is how relatable, even if it doesn't feel like it, even if it feels like you are alone in the hard day, how relatable it is to all new mothers out there. For example, I touched on this, but in the early weeks, her crying was extremely difficult for me to handle. Not in a way of being frustrated that she was crying or that she was being too loud. It just biologically triggered something in my brain. It was so hard. But knowing that other new moms were going through that as well, or knowing that the crying was also hard for them too on that same level, was just very comforting. My cousin was a huge lifeline during these postpartum times, and she has a baby that's a little bit older than Annie is. And anytime she would check in and I would say, oh, this is really hard, she would be like, oh my gosh, I remember that. That was so hard. And it's just those little things. There are moms who talk about a lot of challenges online and memes made about specific challenges in motherhood that just make it seem a little less lonely. So if you can find other people to relate to, whether it's a family member that also has a new baby, or a new mom group, or just creators online that are also sharing their experiences too, to just help validate how normal this stuff is whenever it doesn't seem normal. For example, Annie had just some gnarly witching hours for a few weeks there, actually pretty much from birth up to a few weeks back. And just knowing that witching hours were a universal experience for moms, and they would even talk about just putting in some headphones, making sure her physical needs were met, and just vibing until witching hour was over. Just little things like that, little things that would remind me that a lot of this is a universal experience. Mamas have been there, mamas are there with me right now, helped so much. Also, Jack was just there to remind me that there is no other mother that is better suited for your baby than you are. No matter how inadequate you might, I'm gonna like choke myself up thinking about this. No matter how inadequate you are feeling about being a mom right now, I am telling you, there's no one better for this job for your baby than you. And you are all that your baby needs. I promise you that. You might not feel it in these really hard days, but I am here to tell you that you are everything that your baby needs. But that is going to be it for today's video. I hope you all enjoyed it. If you did and you haven't hit the subscribe button yet, make sure to do so down below. My Instagram is also linked down below in case you want to follow me over there for some real-time updates. I'm excited to start sharing some day in the life videos now that we kind of have our sea legs under us as much as we can at this point. So I'll see you guys in those next videos. I'll see you guys later. Bye!